Garry, I am very honored and privileged to have you on the Frequency Genius 360 Talks. So, for the benefit of the folks, the good folks that are listening, can you give us an overview of your background and also what compelled you to write your new book?
I grew up in Northern Ontario. My father and my mother both are Aboriginal, and we weren't raised on reserves. We're just in the community and paid our taxes and did everything like everybody else. And, you know, I was involved in the automotive industry, and I was always healthy as a kid because I was eating wild and indigenous foods that we grew up around and went out into the forest and gathered. And I started my business and, eating commercial produced food and off the coffee trucks and everything else going. After a long time, of 20 plus years, it took its toll on me, and along with the stress of running a business. When you're under the gun trying to make money to pay bills, you don't generally think of taking care of yourself as properly. And so I got really sick, and basically I healed myself very well using natural food and nutrition and what the environment and the wild foods that Mother Nature has produced around us. And so then a movie was made about me called Free Living 101 by Marcus Rothkranz. And a lot of people started calling me up and wanting to do things like I did. And what compelled me to write my book, Five Weeds, Five Trees, Five Tools, was a lot of people just don't look at the environment in the Mother Nature's or the Creator's perspective of how we should be using things around us instead of, nurturing them and taking care of them. Not that, we could be just raw food or vegetarian or not eating meat or following a particular diet, but looking at Mother Nature from Mother Nature's point of view and how everything in our world is for our benefit. And whether it's poisonous or non-poisonous, there's uses for it, and it has this harmonious balance that I find so many people were not paying attention to. And so I wrote my book from a perspective of only 5 weeds, 5 trees, 5 tools to give people a platform so that they would have some kind of a base rock to stand on, and that they would have some knowledge to be able to use these ingredients and things around them to keep their health better. And I look at it perspectively wise from the way nature shows me all the time. I mean, when you look at why is there a wolf? Well, the wolf is there to eat some deer, and his purpose is to keep the herd of deer healthy so that when you eat some deer, you're healthy. And so just like plants, why are dandelions so popular? Well, dandelions are so popular because they're telling most people on the earth that their liver is impacted by a lot of chemicals and poisons, and so the plant reproduces itself very aggressively because there's lots of toxins in the environment, and it's trying to rebuild the soil like it needs to rebuild your liver and your gut lining. People just don't look at things from the same perspective, and so that's why I basically wrote my book.
That's an excellent introduction. So, what would you say would be the most important message in the book?
Oh, that would be a hard thing to pinpoint. For example, I show how I used spruce gum to basically heal my fingers when they were almost severed right off, like cut right to the bone. I cut through the tendon in my little finger. I never went to any doctors. There's no stitches in my hands. And in a month's time, my fingers were functioning with no pain, completely healed. It's been 7 or 8 months now since that happened, and basically there's not even a scar on my hand you can find. That's just one part of the book that I showed. I show how, for example, a dentist in the United States by the name of William Kelly, same philosophy as I have, even though I didn't know nothing about him when I acquired my philosophy about using nature to cure cancer. I show people his point of view and what he did, because he healed 33,000 people of stage 3 and 4 cancer, some of them with only days and weeks to live, and all he used was real foods, digestible foods, and enzymes. And so, I come also from that perspective, because I see how a black bear, for example, never gets cancer. That's recorded scientifically. They never get cancer, and that's why they're studied by the space program in the United States so well, with the province of Ontario here in Canada. They're studied because they want to send a man to Mars, and they want to know how they can put a man to sleep the way a black bear hibernates, and he wakes up and his intestinal tract is in perfect shape. So, being Aboriginal from this country, I know that what the black bear eats and how he eats successively to keep his gut lining intact. And my cultural background, we honored the bear because he was part of our totem, and we knew what he ate and why he ate to keep his body healthy. And because our digestive system is an omnivore, we are an omnivore. We can eat a variety of things in the environment that are good for us. We need to look at certain animals around us and follow their advice. I mean, there's a phenomenal statement written in the Bible, in the book of Job. And Job tells his physicians, why is it only you that has wisdom? Look at the animals, and they will teach you. Look at the birds in the sky, and they will teach you. Look in the sea, and the fish will teach you. Look at the earth, and the earth will teach you. And so, a lot of this information is put into my book. And I want people to understand this. And the more they understand this, the greater their chances of being self-sufficient and surviving anything that could come along.
So what do you say to those folks that say, well, look, we're not animals, and so this information, while it's wonderful, doesn't translate or correlate with humans?
Well, they're looking at the things from the wrong point of view. Everything in the environment is made for our benefit. It wasn't created for the benefit of somebody from outer space. It was created for our benefit. Everything around us exists to keep us alive. And 99% of people are not stewards of their environment. And that's why we have so much problems in our environment and around the world. From global spraying to the destruction of the oceans to clear cutting of forests, it's mismanagement. I mean, go to any landfill site, all you see is people throwing their cheap imported garbage made from junk into the landfill because it's not made properly or not recycled properly or everything else. So they're not really looking at how the environment is teaching us. And everything in the environment naturally recycles. Like I could talk on recycling for 25 hours and never say the same word twice. I mean, because when we look in our environment, we see everything. It's broken down and reused, and it becomes something else to grow a plant or a tree or to become stone or it's just everything is right there. And anybody who wants to argue what I just said, look, it's very simple. What are you wearing that comes from the moon or Mars or somewhere else? Everything's from the earth.
Well, let me ask you this. You I'm going to just paraphrase, but you essentially said everything that is here for a purpose. Is that correct?
Yes, it's here for a purpose.
So now, can you speak to something timely? I don't want to get too off the subject, but it is timely. The Ebola virus. Now obviously that has a purpose, and so excuse me, can you speak to the Ebola virus, because there's a lot of fear, misinformation, and disinformation pumping out from government agencies. Can you give us your comment and kind of relate it to your book?
Well, for example, all viruses on Earth have a purpose: to strengthen our immune system. And that's basically what they do. So we look at societies today, and everything that we eat well, that other people eat, because I don't eat that way. Everything that most people eat is sterile. It's washed, it's cleaned, it's sprayed. The whole society today is a germaphobe. Oh, like we've got to clean this spotlessly. But most people don't realize, for example, 80% of their body mass is basically bacteria. That's what it is. And it's ongoing, working all the time, and it's a harmonious balance about it. So people don't look at the environment properly. And in the environment, animals don't get all of these fevers and problems because they're continuously eating from the local food supply, and they eat what they need to keep their body healthy. We, as human beings, rely on someone else to keep us healthy instead of actually paying attention to how nature teaches us how they keep themselves healthy. I mean, you don't see deer in the local park where one of them has a medical officer bag on his back saying, "Hey, I'm the medic," and you don't see them lined up at the local clinic for a flu shot. I mean, I've never seen that. I've never seen Burns coming here to Ontario from Florida carrying a juicer and saying, "Hey, chickadee, do you have electricity so I can make up a smoothie?" I don't see that in the environment. I even talk about this in my book. I briefly touch on it. And, I don't see this. So, for example, when we look at hemorrhagic fevers, what Ebola is, people who get these types of viruses usually are deficient in vitamin C's. And there's three things from the environment that we have to have: vitamin C, B12, and zinc. We must have those three ingredients. If we don't have them, we can't function, because every functionality of our body requires those three ingredients to do any type of function in the body. There is no way around it. We must have them. So look at what people are eating today. They're eating such highly processed foods that are devoid of vitamin C, don't have any B12, and are always low in zinc. So what do you expect? You think your immune system is going to be strong enough to beat a virus? Now, I watched the news this morning. I just happened to see this when I was cooking up a stir fry for myself and some organic eggs. I noticed that, this nurse in Texas got Ebola from the patient she was taking care of in the hospital who died. And her body seems to be responding and doing better when she got a blood transfusion from a man who's actually survived the virus on his own. So, people aren't getting it. They're not getting the understanding. People who will survive these viruses is because their immune system is able to handle it. Why is their immune system able to handle it? It's because they're taking care of their immunity by eating properly or doing something that other people are not doing.
Well, let me play devil advocate for a moment. You noted that in Texas there was a particular individual that has Ebola. So, but I guess it begs the question, like, how do we actually know that that's Ebola? Because when we look to the continent of Africa, a lot of the illness and the sickness that we see is due to malnutrition. So, could it be that indeed that these people do not have Ebola, but in reality, what they have is a compromised immune system due to the lack of proper nutrition?
Yes, and so this virus is going to affect anybody who's not up to par. And whether it's Ebola or not Ebola is not my concern. That's not my question or my answer. To me, it's just very simple. If you're not taking care of your health, yourself, properly, then, we can't blame somebody else. I mean, who holds the fork? Who puts the food in your mouth, or who takes care of you? You do. And if you don't, and you don't think it's important, then, I feel sorry for people who don't think that their environment's important or their health is important. Because I've sat in hospitals with people who've died of cancer, and were worth probably billions of dollars. And they didn't care, about their money. They just wanted to get better. And their money couldn't buy them no matter how important the doctors were that came to see them, they couldn't buy their health back. It was too late for them because they allowed the system to run over them like a Mack truck.
So,
That's it, right?
so speaking of the system, there's again getting back to the original question. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. Okay, to put my audience at ease, let me throw out a question for you. Whether it's Ebola or whatever they want to call it, and whether it's been weaponized to depopulate, which is pretty well known today, or whether it's not, what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying that if one has a very fine-tuned immune system, all this nonsense of whatever virus, whatever bacteria is a moot point. Can you comment on that?
Very simply, look, if you look at a black bear who eats rotten meat and full of maggots and he never gets cancer, what's he doing that maybe you should be doing? Well, it's very simple. Think about it. In the middle of the summer, he goes to chokecherry trees and he eats the chokecherries. But most people today will go to the grocery store and buy oversized, pumped-up cherries that have been sprayed with all kinds of chemicals that never have a worm in them to eat them. They look perfect. But how are they benefiting you? Are they giving you the right amount of quercetin? Are they giving you natural pain remedies? Are they actually so high in cyanide that they will kill all the bacteria off in your gut lining? Because they're not. So look at the wild chokecherry. That's a tiny little cherry. When you put it in your mouth, it's dry. Your tongue will stick to the roof of your mouth because it's so dry and tart. But it's so high in cyanide that it can't kill you, but it will make you go to the bathroom and basically clean all of the garbage out of your intestinal tract. That's what the bear does in the middle of the summertime. That's what I do too. When I'm in the forest and I see a chokecherry tree, I pick a whole bunch of them. And when I bring some home, I cook them up, put them in a mason jar, and I boil them. And they're higher in cyanide then. And in the wintertime, I'll take out a tablespoon of this and I'll add it to my yogurt. So I'm always doing these things, imitating nature to keep my immune system in well. And anybody who gets any type of fever knows vitamin C. It's been proven. Linus Pauling, an actor and a scientist and a researcher, he was given the Nobel Prize a couple of times for his research on vitamin C. He proved that vitamin C could cure all kinds of things. And people's deficiency in it was one of the major problems. So you want the strongest form of vitamin C on earth. I wrote about it in my book. It's called white pine. The eastern white pine grows everywhere in North America, and it grows pretty well around the world. I saw it in the Bahamas. I saw it in Hawaii when I went there a long time ago. It grows pretty well everywhere in the world. It came from North America originally. But all you got to do is take the needles, put them in a cup, a little bit of boiling water, steep this nice lemony flavored tea, and drink it. How easy is that? That's the strongest form of vitamin C on earth. There's nothing that can beat it. I said that on DVD, on film. I've said that in my book. I'm saying it right now on your program. And, people need to get this. Need to understand that everything we need is already around us.
Just a polite correction. This is not a program. This is a talk.
Yeah, sorry.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, Garry, but are you saying that regardless of what's pumped out from the lamestream media and all the fear and all the disinformation and misinformation, you're saying, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying, look, if you have a fine-tuned immune system, just like a fine running automobile, you'll be impervious to anything that will come your way, whether it's bacterial or viral or what have you. Your comment, please.
Look, I feel that if you take care of your health, it's priceless. I'm not saying that if you walk out in front of a train going 100 miles an hour, you're going to survive. anything can happen. But your chances of survival, because you're fit and in good health, not just physically exercising, I'm talking internal health, blood health, immune system health. If you are fit that way, your body will fight off anything it can be thrown at. That's just the way it's supposed to be built. That's the way it was always built. I mean, if you eat garbage, what are you expecting to get the results out of? You're made of garbage. If we take anybody who's ever rebuilt a car or an engine or worked on any piece of mechanical equipment, if we put junk into it, do we expect that it's going to last and perform? We know it's not. So what is the difference between us and that physical material? We're made of atomic structure. An atom is made of neutron, proton, and electron, 3 particles. I mean, water is H2O. It's not H1O. You know, there's 3 parts to it. So we look at the food industry today, and it's highly processed, individual parts. They're isolates. Isolates basically are poison. Nothing in the environment is an isolate. When I consume everything from the environment wild, it's always got a 3-part combination to it. Now, it was a few years ago, I can't think of the plant now, that they were studying from South America someplace, that they said it had something, when people were drinking this particular tea, it was getting rid of cancer. So these scientists isolated one part of it, and when they found that one part, what they thought was curing cancer, they started giving it to people, and the cancer tumors grew faster. But when people drank the natural tea from the plant, hey, the tumors shrank. Because nothing is an isolated incident. It's not isolated. It's got 3 parts to it. And same thing with vitamin C from white pine. You're getting chlorophyll out of the pine needles. Plus, you're getting pineol, which is for your pineal gland. And pineol affects your pineal gland in a way to make all of your hormones work properly. You know, it's 3 parts. It's not an isolated thing. And it has great power.
So, okay, so like, for instance, let's go over vitamin C real quick. Most people get ascorbic acid.
Ascorbic acid, yes.
Yeah, from, let's say, some kind of laboratory that probably uses sugar beets and it's GMO. There are ascorbic acid out there that it's free of GMO, but there's few and far between. But anyways, as an example, that 3-part methodology you speak of, let's take pine needles. You had mentioned chlorophyll, pineol, and forgive me, what was the third?
Vitamin C.
And vitamin C, right? That's an excellent point. For the listeners, can you give us another example from another plant?
Oh, roses. The common garden rose. Any rose. All roses on Earth are high in vitamin C. They're high in chlorophyll, and they're high in another chemical compound. I can't think of the name of it right now, but they're very good. You can take any rose leaf from roses, and you can make tea from them. All rose flowers are edible, raw or made into a jam. I collect rose hips in the early fall around my farm here and up north in the summertime. In August, the way up north, the wild roses, I collect rose hips. Another plant that's really good and high in vitamin C, but it doesn't taste very good. It has a similar taste to dirty socks. It smells like dirty socks too, even cooked or raw. Is tall bush cranberries. It's a common plant that grows out through North America. It's very high in vitamin C and other ingredients. Doesn't taste good, very bitter, but it's very good for your health. There's thousands of things out there. It's just people, don't want to spend the time to really investigate.
So let's go with the pine needle. Let's say some folks get a reaction from it. Can you counter, what would be the better vitamin C?
Well, both red and white pine are kind of equal, white pine being the highest, red pine is second. There's different forms of jack pine. There's different pine trees. All pine trees have a really high form of vitamin C, but white pine happens to be the strongest. You know, the first thing I would suggest, if you're going to try anything from the environment, take a little bit of it, a small amount. I'm not talking gallons, you know, a pinch. Scrub it between your fingers, smell it. Your nose is the first primary sense of defense. It goes to your olfactory. It tells you whether you like it or don't. And then taste a little bit of it. You know, if you're tasting a quarter of a leaf like the size of a penny, I'm pretty sure, unless you're deadly allergic to it, which pretty well 99% of green stuff is in the northern hemisphere is non-toxic. If you go into the Arctic Circle, everything that's green is non-toxic. There's nothing that you can poison yourself from. So here in Canada, at least 75% of the green material is, when it's young, is edible, even raw. It might not taste good, but it's pretty well edible. So, you know, look at nature. I mean, if you see bees pollinating something, usually there's a medicinal or a food value to it. If you see birds eating something, definitely it's not poison. If you have a goat around your place or a farmer who has a goat, anything a goat eats, you can eat, because goats will not eat poison. If you live in a hot climate, anything a monkey eats, you can eat, because monkeys don't eat poison. And they all have one thing in common. They use their nose. They smell. The only difference between them and us is we've lost our ability to smell because we don't use our nose very often. And their smelling ability is like sometimes 100,000 times better than us. For example, if we look around my farm, deer will come and eat stuff at my farm, and they'll avoid everybody else's farm around here and even people's gardens because they're spraying chemicals on the food. And it's been proven that a deer with 1 part per billion of pesticide on some plants, the deer will eat the plant right beside it that has nothing on it. And it's 1 part per billion. So we need to watch nature. You know, they got the answer. Not me. They do.
I know in my neighborhood, in my development, I'm the only house out of the 60 homes that have ants and ant hills, and I'm the only one that does not spray the lawns, you know, the ChemLawn kind of chemicals. And I also noticed that a lot of the cats and other animals, like the birds, will fly into more so to my, you know, lot than my neighbors. And so that's very interesting what you're saying.
Well, for example, in my Etobicoke house in my backyard in Etobicoke, north end of Toronto, I have probably 15 bird houses up for birds to house in. And I have a couple of neighbors that grow natural food and don't use any chemicals around me. And it seems like my house is the place where the birds are. Like, there's birds around my house by the hundreds. And they're there because they know instinctively, and they smell that they eat the food from my area. They keep my bug population down. And they're always in my wild spinach, or they're always eating all the seeds that from the plants that I'm growing around my house. So, you know, animals know. They do. And like you say, you're in a developed area, and because you're not using any pesticides around your place, the wildlife knows. They know.
Like you mentioned, they're more intuitive and they're more in tune. So that begs a question for city people, and obviously there will be a fair amount of folks that are listening to this that live in a city. They can't go to these parks, and if they do, they probably more than likely spray. So what do you say
here in Canada now, it's been basically against the law for more than 5 or 6 years. There's no spraying in any parks of any kind.
Well, I can't speak to the U.S., but basically, can you comment on what folks can do if they're in the city and they don't have access because they don't have a car or what have you, and they live in the city? Can you please give them some advice as to what they can do?
Okay, well, here's a very powerful statement that's written and recorded in the Bible. It says God has a protection on the grass and the trees. And what that means to my brain is when I look at the environment, you're walking down the sidewalk someplace and you see a dandelion growing up in the crack, or you see, a thistle growing up on the side of somebody's driveway, or you walk down to a park or someplace and you'll see these certain plants growing along the walkway or right beside the road. The purpose of these plants is to rebuild soil. And if they didn't exist, even though it's been sprayed in those areas, along the roadsides or whatever, if those plants could not grow there, they wouldn't have the resistance to those chemicals. And because they're growing there, they actually have a resistance, and they're like an antidote to those chemicals, because in order for them to exist, they had to have that resistance built into them to exist in that environment. And they put minerals and vitamins inside of them that when you actually consume them, you build up that resistance. That builds a resistance in you. And there's all the negative naysayers that say, well, you can't eat this and you can't do that. Well, I'm still here and I'm still doing it. So I don't know. I just like to ask the question, if I'm still doing it and I'm still here, and I've had my blood tested by quite a number of pretty scholarly people, and they all tell me that if I keep doing what I'm doing, I should live to 150. And these are some pretty serious people.
So right. So again, what would be your advice to people that live, let's say, in New York City or some of the bigger cities? What would be your advice as far as them sourcing the proper nutrition?
Well, one, if they follow some of the principles I've outlined in my book, you don't have to make it very complicated. If you take plantain, for example, it grows everywhere in the world, everywhere. A simple plant. It's really good for detoxifying your bowels and healing your skin, internal and external. And it's very nutritious. It's high in vitamin A and C as well. Look at dandelions. Dandelions have so many, they're high in phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, iron, calcium, and the list of vitamins that are in it is just like mind-bending. You look at the common weed called lamb's quarters or purslane. Both lamb's quarters and purslane have more amino acids in them than, boy, it's practically, they could compete with mother's breast milk, okay? They could compete with hemp or marijuana, another plant that has been shunned on and stepped on by a lot of people around the world, because the power players don't want you to know that that plant basically would make you almost self-sufficient in food, clothes, tools, fixing your car, running your car on free energy. One plant would do it all.
Which plant? Let's clarify, because you mentioned several.
The family of hemp, or what you guys call marijuana. The hemp family of plants. Well, hemp is a family of plants.
Well, let's clarify this, because the hemp plant doesn't get you high. It does have the constituent THC, but the marijuana that you mentioned is something altogether different from a medicinal standpoint. So
that's not really true. That's the bureaucracy telling people that. If you really look into hemp, okay, the only difference is there's less the chemical compounds, but when you look at hemp, it's even recorded and written about in the Bible. It's called manna. And in my book, I actually show the physical description of what manna looks like. And I even quote the verses and from the Bible exactly where to look so you can find them yourself. And I show this description. And so a lot of people don't know what hemp really consists of. It has 21 amino acids. The 21 amino acids you have to survive life on. It has 3 times the amount of these amino acids, in most cases, of all of the amino acids, that you would get from mother's milk. Even Henry Ford, the original founder of the Ford Motor Company, wanted to make cars in the 20s with all the floor pans and stuff from hemp because he knew of its sustainability. You know, it's a long time known. And so I quote something in my book. All forms of protein on Earth, hemp being one of them, beans, lentils, fish, eggs, and meat, and milk, are all highly controlled by every one of the governments around the world. Why is that? Is because protein sources are what really keep us healthy. And good sources like that are easy to come by, and they don't want the average person to know that we could be very sustainable and not having to import all kinds of stuff. The biggest effect would have caused would be less pollution, and the bankers wouldn't make so much money off of us.
So let
You
me.
know, the banking industry is about commerce. They want to make money.
Well, everything is commerce, and obviously
But
there's
some people are more
conspiracies.
into it than others.
Yeah, but there's conspiracies. There's everything is a racket when you get right down to it. The way business is conducted, and there's monopolies and mafias and cartels and all this. It's just that's just the way that's reality we live in right now. But so okay, so then let me ask you this: in a lot of what you read on the internet, which is a pretty broad statement. But anyways, they say that you shouldn't really eat that much protein, that it's hard on your liver, it's hard on your organ systems. Are they talking more about meats, or are they talking about a plant-based type of protein, like you mentioned, like hemp seeds and chia seeds and so forth? Your comment, please?
Okay, let's look at the way the body is made up. So if we took 100%, a human body, 72.6% is water. So we got 28.4% left over. Out of that 28.4%, 80% of that is fat, 20% is protein, and the rest is the fruits and vegetables, the fiber that holds us together. So that's the ratio Weston A. Price discovered all indigenous cultures on Earth ate. From 1930 to 1937, he photographed teeth for 3.5 years around the world. And for the next 3.5 years, he studied what people ate and why they ate what they did. And he found that when processed foods came into an environment, he saw that he found 3 cavities per mouth in a little cultural town. But when there was no processed foods of any kind, he had to examine 100 people to find 1 cavity. And when his report came out in 1937, and he was the chief dental officer and practitioner for all of the United States. He was a direct advisor to the President of the United States. He was the chief medical officer in dentistry for Harvard University. And they voted him off of his board, and they said to Mr. Price, they said, like you said in your own book, if everybody followed this way of eating, we wouldn't need very many dentists. So, again, it's about the money system and control and telling people, the brainwashing of people into believing that we can't survive and live off a piece of ground. We don't have the necessary tools. We can't get the proper nutrition. It's all this fear factor going on. Like you said earlier when we started talking.
So, Garry, how can the listeners learn more about your work, and also how can they purchase your book?
Well, they can get in touch with me through my website, GarryTibbo.com, and they could send me an email at Garry@GarryTibbo.com. There's some interviews on there about me and a few things. They can call me anytime at 416-709-3535. I do answer my phone. I'm not worried about it. And a lot of people are surprised about that, actually. And, they can Google my name. They'll find out all kinds of things about me. I'm an open book. I do teaching at my farm. People can come and spend time with me and, actually do work with me and see stuff that I talk about. And I want more people to learn. That has always been my primary focus, to teach people real good survival skills and good nutrition and food skills, because it's going to become, in my opinion, a valuable tool and more important in the very near future.
Let me ask you this before we depart, what was the biggest surprise from your book that you could share with the listeners?
There's a simple statement written in biblical text that I loved so much that I actually put it in my book. It says, in the tillage of the soil, in the tillage of the poor, the tilling the soil, there is great waste, and for lack of understanding, there is great want. And so, you look at that today. People don't let their soil rest. They don't value the weeds. They continuously try to kill them. And I came to the conclusion a long time ago that the weeds were food while my food was growing. And they were the natural herbs of the field to help me be healthy and clean my body up really well, keep my blood pure. And it was very simple. I didn't have to work very hard at growing a lot of food, even though I do grow a fair amount of food to help other people too as well. I found that, the more I study this and the more I look at it, there's just so much available. There is, all around us. I get a lot of comments from people who read my book and tell me that my book is not something they should be reading, but they have to study it. And I get the same comments about the DVD too, that people will watch it 8, 9, 10 times. And, because of the information that's on there. So my book covers a different perspective, shows a little bit more things about me. And, like I'm an open book. I like teaching people, and I want them to really learn. I don't know what else to tell.
Well, on that happy note, what I'll do is, for those that are listening and watching the video online, I'll have the website links and also your contact information, such as your phone number. And so they'll be able to click on that and be directed right to where they can learn more and also purchase your book. Listen, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to interview. It's been majorly insightful and a lot of wisdom that you've shared with us. And we'll definitely have to have you back.
Well, I thank you very much for having me on. And, I'm standing out in the middle of the field here looking at the fall colors, watching the birds flying around. So, I got to give credit to good technology as well, I guess. Anyway, you have a great day.
Thank you very much.